We will forge ahead.
Great.
Great. So welcome everyone to the latest episode of Dear Editor, the Research Medical Library series in which editors answer frequently asked questions from MD Anderson authors about writing and publishing. I'm Amy Nanetto, a senior scientific editor in the library, and with me is my colleague Stephanie Deming, also a senior scientific editor. So today we're going to show you some reliable resources that the editors often refer our authors to when authors are looking for additional help in improving their writing, and ones that we consult when we're answering questions from authors, and sometimes when we have questions ourselves when we're editing. So it's becoming, as I'm sure you've noticed, increasingly common to get AI generated or SEO optimized search results when you Google something. And those sites are rarely helpful and not always accurate. So the sites we're going to show you today have been vetted by the editors, and we found them to be useful and trustworthy, and so we think you will too. The handout that Stephanie has posted in the chat has links to all of those sites so that you can refer to them later and bookmark the ones that you like. And we'll also provide the slides and the recording as usual. So the sites we're going to show you will familiarize you with the extensive resources of the RML, as well as where you can find advice on planning and writing each section of a research article, find some sample grant applications that you can use as models for yours, get some tips on making your writing flow and cohere, and find some reference materials if you have questions about grammar or word usage. I'm going to switch my window. Bear with me for just a second. Okay. So starting from the Research Medical Library's homepage, you can access our kind of extensive library of resources on writing and publishing. And so this is the content that we, the editorial staff, have created. So obviously we like to refer our authors to it, and sometimes we even go back to it to see what we said about a certain topic. So the best place to do this is from the Research Medical Library's homepage, navigate to the Education Hub. There's a drop-down menu, but I think it's actually just easier to go to the full page to find what you want. And here you can access some short videos, guides, and FAQs on writing and publishing. So let's say you want to create a poster, but you don't really know where to start. Shouldn't have done it that way. Um, Here you'll find some videos about posters, just really short 3-minute ones. You'll find a library guide that we produced about some general tips for creating a poster. Link to MD Anderson's poster template, and then some examples uh, that you can view on our institutional depository OpenWorks. So there's lots of good info there. And there's also, I should mention, if you scroll down, there's an FAQ that you can consult. So going back to the Education Hub, the next thing I wanted to show you is our self-paced courses, which involve lots of writing different kinds of manuscripts and grants. So, for example, if you want to just get to know kind of the basics of writing an NIH style grant, you would choose Research Plan Fundamentals. And this will take you to an enrollment page. I'm already enrolled, so I won't drag you through that process. So after you're enrolled, you'll be taken to Study, which is MD Anderson's learning management system. And then you would click on Research Plan Fundamentals. And that takes you to the course homepage, which shows you several modules. So each module has some videos, supplementary materials, and quizzes that you can take to test your knowledge. You can go through these modules in order from beginning to end, or end to beginning, I guess, or you could just pick the ones that you want to view. The next site you might find useful is the Research Medical Library's YouTube channel. As you can see, we have a lot of playlists on a lot of different topics having to do with writing and publishing, from kind of very basic to more advanced levels. Things like creating figures and tables, choosing a journal and avoiding predatory journals, using AI, and of course, I'm obligated to highlight the entire Dear Editor archive. So our handle is MD Anderson at MD Anderson Library, and you can subscribe right here. So heading back to the homepage, if you scroll down towards the bottom, you can access our monthly newsletter, Library News. So Library News keeps you up to date on all kinds of new and existing resources from the library. And the editors contribute articles on topics like writing strategies, current issues in publishing, NIH grant guidelines and changes in those, and things like word usage and tricky points of grammar. For many years, the editors wrote those last kind of articles on usage and grammar as a separate blog called Word for Word. And that was folded into Library News a few years ago. So you'll see those same kind of articles in Library News, but the archive still exists on the internet, and the link is in the handout. And so there's a lot here. These entries go back to 2011, I think. But fortunately, it's easily searchable, and you can also look at the different categories over here. So if you're wondering whether it's underway with a space or underway with no space, this is a good place to check. And I am going to turn it over to Stephanie for now to show you some external resources that she likes.
Thanks, Amy. All right, can you see my window?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we are partial to the Research Medical Library's resources that Amy just reviewed, but we know there are also lots of other good resources out there on writing. And one of our favorites is this Clinical Chemistry Guide to Scientific Writing. This guide has 14 short articles. It has articles on writing the parts of the scientific paper, the introduction, the method section, the results section, the discussion section. It has an article about authorship. There's an article about writing review articles. There's some good information about figures and tables. These articles, they're short, they're easy to read, and they're fun. The author makes good use of humor to help keep the topics interesting. And probably of particular interest to MD Anderson authors, the articles in this series have been translated into several languages, including Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese, Turkish, and Russian. So I'm not going to go through all the articles, but I wanted to highlight a couple in this series. The first is this article on writing introduction sections. It was a cold and rainy night. Set the scene with a good introduction. So this article has great advice on structuring an introduction section. And it has a couple of examples, example 1 and example 2. And then near the end of the article is a really helpful learning exercise. The author gives people 10 sentences that they then have to put in order to create a good introduction. And I just think that's a really nice way of giving you an opportunity to practice what you've just learned, which is a great way to make information stick. The other article in this series that I want to highlight is about writing articles in the so-called EARDAM structure, and that stands for Introduction, Results, Discussion, and Methods. And of course, a lot of the information out there on writing scientific articles is written for articles that are in the IMRAD structure. So introduction, methods, results, and discussion. But of course, some of the top journals in science and a lot of articles on basic science are written in the structure where the results come right after the introduction and the methods are at the end. So this article does a really good job of explaining the rationale for writing articles with this ear structure and showing how to write effectively in that structure. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about some websites where you can find good examples. Um, Whenever I am asked to write a new kind of document, one of the first things I will say is, can you show me a good example? I need a model to follow. Like, what am I trying to do? And you all know that you can find great models of abstracts online, and you can find great models of journal articles because a lot of journals publish their articles online now, free access. You can find them through the library. You can search PubMed to find articles on specific topics, but you may not know about these repositories of funded grant proposals. So I want to share these websites with you. The first repository is from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and their page is called Sample Applications and More. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can find this table of contents, and the NIAID has provided samples of funded applications for several different NIH grant types, R01, R03, R15, and these are all applications that were submitted to the NIAID. So if you click on a grant type, so I'm going to click on R01, you will get a list of applications that were funded, and these applicants were kind enough to share their funded applications along with the summary statements. And some of these are actually quite recent. So this first one in the list from George Liu was prepared using Forms H, which is actually the second most recent version of Forms from NIH. And if you open this up, you'll see the full application in its original format. The only thing to keep in mind is that if you look at one of the older samples in the list, just keep in mind that it was prepared with older forms and older instructions from NIH. So the structure and in some cases the content will be a little bit different from what is requested today. But there's a whole bunch of different samples here that you can look at and use as models for your own writing. Another repository I want to share is the general NIH repository of sample applications. And here, I want to point out in particular that there is a set of applications from to the National Cancer Institute. So this might be of particular interest to MD Anderson applicants. And they have applications on behavioral research, cancer epidemiology, implementation science, and healthcare delivery research. And they have examples of R01s, R03s, R21s. So this is a really good thing to know about. Another really useful thing on this website is they have sample language. So if you go up here near the top and you click on this link for NIH formats, sample language, and other examples, you can find examples of biosketches, of informed consent descriptions, data management and sharing plans. And one thing that I think is really interesting is you can find sample language for talking about scientific rigor. I'm going to open this up. So, in the past several years, NIH has become increasingly focused on making sure that applicants are conducting scientifically rigorous work and describing in their applications how they're going to make their work rigorous. And so they give you some examples here of how to do that. So here's someone describing an animal experiment, and they're talking about, repetition and controls. There's just a whole bunch of examples here that you can follow, and I think it's really helpful because they give you a sense of what is the level of detail that I should be including in my application. And then right here at home, the Training Grants and Fellowships Office has a proposal library, and it's organized by grant type. And there's a little bit of overlap between this repository and the ones I've just shown, but there's also some new applications here, I believe. All right, I am going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Amy now.
And I'm going to remember to unmute myself. Um, so the next thing I wanted to show you are some sites that can give you advice on some of the more technical aspects of writing. So, for example, you might wonder, when do I start a new paragraph? Or how can I vary my sentence structure more? Or where do I use a comma instead of a semicolon? Or what should go in the cover letter when I submit my manuscript to a journal? So, there are two university writing centers whose sites we find really helpful, and they provide comprehensive information on these and almost any other writing topic you can imagine. So the first one is from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and their website has a tips and tools section. It is an excellent resource. And as you can see, it has pages and videos on a lot of different topics, kind of sorted by the kind of bigger conceptual and process issues surrounding writing a paper, some more fine-grained concerns. And then here I wanted to note that there are guides for writing all different kinds of, or all different genres of documents. This is a little bit geared towards undergraduates and graduate students, but you can see there are things like how to write a conference paper or a professional email or grant proposals, journal publication letters, um, scientific research reports, things like that. So there's a lot of good info here. So to give you an idea of what it offers, one page we particularly like is this one on transitions. So here you'll find some information on diagnosing whether your writing needs better transitions, understanding the different types of transitions and how they function, and then how to use transitions to organize your paper and to express the relationships between your ideas. Another good resource, especially for grammar questions, is the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, or OWL. This site is really well known among grammar and writing nerds like us, and it's won awards for its very comprehensive information. And here, I think the grammar section is particularly useful. And I'm going to mute the autoplay. The autoplay videos on this site are pretty annoying, but the information is still worth putting up with that a little bit. So again, I like the grammar section. This is really good if you have a kind of a challenging grammar section or something you can't quite work out, or just something you want more explanation on. So you have just sort of basic topics like using articles or making subjects and verbs agree, but also kind of more complicated things like that versus which, or what preposition goes with what verb. That can be really tricky, or how to use relative pronouns. So lots of those kinds of things that can improve just the technical fluency of your writing. And then the final resource I wanted to show you is how to access the AMA Manual of Style. So that's the style manual produced by the editors of the JAMA family of journals, and it's widely used by editors of lots of biomedical journals. Um, it is a subscription only resource, so you do need to access it through the library. What I've done is um, I find it through the library and then I bookmarked it. And if I'm on the MD Anderson network, that bookmark should take me right to it without needing to search and log in again. So the easiest way to access this for the first time is to just go to the search box on the RML website, and you could just type AMA manual and it will pull up the suggested resource here. The 11th edition is the current one. And while that loads, I'll just click over to it. And so here you have the full table of contents. Not all of this is necessarily relevant to authors. Most of it really is guidelines about the processes for journal staff, for journals editors. But there are a couple of sections that are helpful for writers. One of those is section 11 on correct and preferred usage. So this is information about how to write clearly and accurately, about patience, about medical procedures, drugs, laboratory tests, and any kind of other medical terminology. Another useful one is chapter 19, particularly section 19.1, study design and statistics. And this gives really useful information on what should be included in each section of a research article. And it's a little bit different from other guides in that it divides the information or provides the information on the basis of the type of study, the study design. So you may be doing a parallel design double-blind trial. And so this section will give you information on, what needs to be specified in the methods. What are the reporting guidelines? So what needs to be in the results? And you can, they have virtually every different kind of study design that the JAMA journals publish. So that's really useful for getting like kind of deep down into what your particular study needs to have. So I'm going to pass it back to Stephanie for our last group of resources.
Thanks, Amy. And I just want to mention that I just put in the chat the handout one more time for anybody who came in after I posted it earlier. All right, so continuing with the theme of word usage, I wanted to mention just a few resources about words. You probably all have a dictionary, but you might not have it with you when you're writing. So a really good online dictionary is this Merriam-Webster one. So let's say one of your colleagues put the word zeitgeist in one of your papers and you're thinking, I'm not sure, is that the right term? You can just type it in the search bar in Merriam-Webster's and get a nice definition. The general intellectual, moral, and cultural climate of an era, sorry. So it's just a really fast way to look words up. There is also a thesaurus. If I click on the thesaurus, oh, there isn't anything for zeitgeist. Let me try convoluted. Let's try looking that up. Maybe somebody you're working with has used convoluted in an article and you're thinking, I don't know, is that exactly the right word? You can look it up. Having many parts or aspects that are usually interrelated. And then you can look down here and see what are the synonyms. So you might think, well, maybe what we really need to say here is complex or complicated. So you can click around and see what the different definitions are. So it's not earth-shattering, but Merriam-Webster's is widely respected. And so if you don't have a physical dictionary at hand, I think this is a really good site to check out. Another good dictionary site is OneLook. And the nice thing about OneLook is that when you search for a word, it will give you an option of several dictionaries to look in. So, okay, OneLook says you can find zeitgeist, okay, in Merriam-Webster's, also in Collins. So you can just pick whichever dictionary you want. If you look for a very scientific, technical word, let's try like DNA sequencing, a phrase, and see what happens there. So you'll get more technical dictionaries. So anyway, just some convenient online dictionaries if you don't have a physical dictionary at hand. Another dictionary, I love this dictionary, the NCI Dictionary of Cancer Terms. I don't know who put this together, but I think they're wonderful. This is a great resource if you need to write an abstract or another document for lay readers. So you have to put things in terms that an educated non-scientist could understand. It can be pretty hard to do. And this NCI dictionary can be really helpful. So let's say you have to describe in non-super technical terms, what is a gene? So here's an example. The functional and physical unit of heredity passed from parent to offspring. Genes are pieces of DNA, and most genes contain the information for making a specific protein. So you might be able to do something with that. There is also a related dictionary called the NCI Dictionary of Genetics terms. Let's try searching for gene there. Um, Here we have a similar definition, but it adds they contain information for making specific proteins that lead to the expression of a particular physical characteristic or trait, such as hair color or eye color. Okay. So the only other thing I would mention is that if you're searching for something like whole exome sequencing and you put it in like this, okay. Oh wait, that's a bad example, sorry. What I wanted to say is that you have to make sure that if you're searching for a term, you don't find it, it might be because it doesn't start with what you typed in. You might have to click over here to contains. So anyway, this is a really helpful dictionary, and it can help if you have to write things in terms that an educated non-scientist can understand. And the last resource I want to share is this academic phrase bank. I think this site is just wonderful. It has a huge collection of phrases that are useful in academic writing, and they're organized by theme. So maybe you want to describe trends. You can go over here and click describing trends, and then you get choices. Highlighting a trend in a table or chart. Well, that's something that people have to do a lot in scientific writing. Here's some ideas. Um, what's striking in this table is the variability of, is the steady decline in, is the general pattern, is a dramatic decline. Um, what about, let's say you want to explain causality. You can click on that group. You get a whole bunch of options here. Let's look at indicating a possible causal relationship. Here's some phrases you could use. There's some evidence that X may affect Y. It is not clear whether X is made worse by Y. So you could, if you're stuck, um, check out the phrase bank and see if one of the phrases or terms here might be helpful. And because these are short phrases and terms, you don't have to worry about plagiarism if you use something that appears in this phrase bank. The phrases are so short and they're so commonly and widely used that you don't have to worry about plagiarism for using them in your own work. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. And Amy and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Um, or if you have really great websites that we didn't mention and you want to share them with the group, we'd welcome that too. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this point.